We were always adventurous kids. We liked taking risks, like playing Ding Dong Ditch and going to places alone with our parents. But although we never feared playing pranks, having adrenaline rushes, or even getting almost caught in Ding Dong Ditch, this one incident ruined our adventures for us forever. I was about 10, and my sister was 12 when this incident took place. Our mother had asked us to go to the plaza nearby to pick up some treats and food for our cat. We asked if we could go alone, and to our surprise, our mother, who was a very protective person, agreed. On our way home from school that day, we decided to stop by the dollar store to pick up some school supplies. We got home, ate lunch, and got a card from our parents to get the things we needed. The walk lasted only 5 quick minutes, and after picking up the cat treats, I went over to the dollar store with my sister. Everything was going normally for about 2 minutes, but as I was looking through the notebooks, my sister elbowed me.
Hey, do you see that man over there?
She whispered. I followed her gaze toward the far end of the aisle, where a tall, elderly man was pretending to look through the grid paper. He was wearing work boots and black jeans with a leather jacket over a stained red undershirt. His head was down, his face half covered by a baseball cap, but I could see that every once in a while, the man's dark eyes shifted to us, watching us like a hawk. Every time we moved, the man tensed his muscles and moved slightly as well, as though preparing to follow us. What's he doing? I asked.
I don't know,
My sister replied.
but I don't like him. He looks creepy and suspicious.
Well, what do you want to do? I asked.
Get your notebook and let's observe.
My sister responded.
I want to see if he's actually following us or not.
I picked up a notebook with lined paper and we left the aisle, glancing back as we left. To our horror, the man was creeping down the aisle we had just left, following us. He's following us, I whispered. My sister grabbed my sleeve and tugged me along.
Pretend you don't notice,
She said. In a louder voice, she added,
Now come on, didn't you say you needed sharpeners or something?
I knew what she was doing. She was trying to see if the man would follow us to the other aisle. The cycle repeated itself for a long time. We'd walk into the aisle and the man would follow, staring at us with malice in his dark eyes. Finally, we couldn't continue walking like lost idiots because we were getting stared at by other people, so we went to the self-checkout corner. As though God ignored our prayers of asking the man to leave, our card didn't work. We tried to swipe, tap, and insert several times. We knew the PIN and we typed it correctly many times, but nothing happened. I began to freak out, and I could see that my sister was panicking. We were about to go to a regular checkout corner when we heard, Can I help you? From behind us. We turned to see an odd-looking woman behind us. She looked well-built with a slopey-down makeup smeared on her face, as if she had put it on a rush. Her voice was off too, as if a man was impersonating a woman. Yes, please, help us, I said, thinking that, if this wasn't the creepy man from before, why not get some help? The woman smiled creepily and said, What seems to be the problem? Our card isn't working, I said. Can you please help us? The woman nodded and removed her card from her purse. Something odd that I found to be about the purse was that it still had its tag on, as if it was brand new, or had the woman just not paid for it yet? I don't know. My sister, elbowing me in the side, brought me to the back of my thoughts.
What have you done?
She hissed into my ear.
Do you know in what a weird predicament you put us in?
What's weird about getting some help? I asked.
She isn't helping us.
My sister objected.
She's paying for our things.
So? I pressed. I really didn't see the point my sister was trying to make, but I didn't have the time to ponder upon it, because the woman's voice interrupted my thoughts. All paid, she said, handing us the bag with our stuff in it. Her voice sounded way weirder. Thanks, I replied. The woman smiled again. No problem, she replied. Say, do you want to...
No, thank you,
my sister interrupted, a little rudely in my opinion.
We have to get home. Thank you for paying for our stuff, though.
With that, she grabbed my arm and dragged me out of the dollar store, leaving the woman alone by the checkout counter. You didn't have to be so rude, I said once we were outside.
Well, she was being a creep.
Bruh, my sister replied.
Besides, we don't need to go anywhere with her, and she was sort of, getting on my nerves.
Oh my god, I said. Why judge too quickly? I muttered.
I don't trust too much. Now hurry up and let's go.
My sister responded, quickening her pace. In order to get to our house, there was 2 ways. One would be down by several busy sidewalks, and the other would have to get us cut through a dark, creepy alley. first would take longer, so against our better judgment, the two of us turned the corner and stepped into the dark alleyway. As we got halfway, which was also where the darkness grew, I felt my sister let go of my arm, and I heard something like a body hitting the floor. "What's up?" Before I could go on, something hit me on the head, and the last thing I knew was that I'd fallen to the ground. When I awoke, I found myself sitting in something that was moving. Opening my eyes, I glanced around to find myself sitting in the trunk of a tinted SUV that was moving along the road. Besides, it was me, my sister, Kat, cuffed, tied, and gagged. She had blood on the side of her head and cuts along her legs that I could see because her pants were torn at the bottom. I glanced down at my arms and legs, and I saw that I had the same cuts, some was still bleeding. Blood was also blastering my hair to the side of the head, and I felt a strong headache coming on. I peered over the row of back seats of the SUV, and my blood turned to ice. A woman, about 25 to 30 years of the age, lay on the back seats. Her eyes were wide open and rolled back in her head, and her hair was drenched in dried blood. Her skin was excessively pale, and I could see several stab wounds on her chest and stomach. She was definitely dead, and the awful smell and maggots confirmed that. In the driver's seat, however, sat an even creepier surprise. It was the same man, the same one who had creeped my sister out in the dollar store, and beside him was that same purse that woman who had paid for her stuff had. I froze, all the blood draining from my face when I realized that the woman who had helped us was actually the man who was following us around. My heart began to pound, and I knew I had to get out somehow. I began struggling against the rope, and that tape was used to tie me, and tearing sound, my legs came free. I began to spit on the tape that covered my mouth until it came off too. Dang, my mouth hurt a lot. And then I chewed on the ropes, and tape bouncing my hands until they came loose too.
What are you doing?
My sister asked, and I jumped up. I hadn't noticed that she was awake and had removed the gag and tape from her mouth. "Getting us out of here," I replied.
How?
She asked. I paused. I hadn't thought of a way yet, but I was losing hope. My sister elbowed me. "Look," she hissed, pointing at the dead woman's body. "I know, she's dead," I whispered back.
No.
My sister hissed back. With her arms and legs still tied, she propped her on her knees and carefully slid her over the top of the back seats. She leaned forward, and for a second, I thought that she was going to smell the body because of her close head to the body. But suddenly, the man stepped on the brakes, and my sister fell back into the trunk. A phone in between her teeth. She dropped it, and I took it.
"Call the police,"
she muttered, beginning to try and untie herself. I took the phone and swiped the screen. The picture of the man who was driving the car flashed on the phone. To my surprise and somewhat horror, he had his arm around the same woman who lay dead in the car he kidnapped us. Both were smiling, but in the corner of the screen, I saw the shiny handle of a knife sticking out from his pocket. "My God," I whispered. "He was planning to kill the woman earlier." My sister elbowed me while I was trying to untie her leg.
"Stop looking at pictures and call the cops."
She snapped back. Dang, I must say she talked pretty loudly. But luckily the man didn't hear us. He has hearing problems or something. I opened the phone contact and called the cops. When the operator picked up, I had to briefly explain the situation. "Alright, stay calm," the operator said. "The police have tracked the van. They'll be out soon." I watched as my sister finally managed to get her legs free, and watched as she pulling the canister of pepper spray she carried with her from her pocket. As the operator began asking me another question, the car slammed to a halt and I heard the door opening and closing. My heart stopped as through the windows I could see the man thundering towards us. He pulled it open with a knife in his hand and shouted, "You stupid children! How dare you call the cops!" He wanted to strike us, but my hand shot up in reflex and I grabbed the blade, pulling it as hard as I could from the man's hand, but he was strong. He didn't let go, and nor did I. Suddenly, my sister's hand shot past my face and she sprayed the man in the face. He fell back, screaming, jumping out of the car and plunging the blade into our attacker's shoulder. He lunged for me, but my sister hit him in the face with the bottom of her purple stick canister, and I grabbed him from behind, slamming him down into the ground. The man shouted something we couldn't understand, and then a car door opened and shut, and a cloaked figure appeared. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but I could see long black hair cover the person's face. The person seemed to glide towards us. Then it gently took the knife from my hand, and leaned into the man's face, whispering in a female's voice.
This is what you deserve.
A spray of blood signified that the person had slit the man's throat. He fell back, gagging and coughing, just as the police lights flashed in the distance. My sister and I stood there, shocked and confused. As the cops drew near, the hooded person turned to us and said,
Thank you for all that you've done.
I watched as the figure pulled the hood away and brushed the hair from her face. And to my absolute horror, the figure was the same woman whose dead body was laying in the back seat of the car. She raised a pale hand and waved before slowly melting into thin air. My sister and I must have fainted, because the next thing we knew, the two of us were sitting in the waiting room of a hospital. We weren't seriously hurt, so the doctors let us go soon. Our parents told us that the man who kidnapped us was a human trafficker, working in a human trafficking ring. The woman was his girlfriend. He was trying to persuade her to join the ring, but she had refused. The two had fought, and the man had stabbed her before shoving her body into the back of his car and driving out to the dollar store to buy something so that he could bury the body. He couldn't resist snatching two children who had trouble with swiping their parents' credit card. Quite the man who abducted us, and just like a woman to do so, may we never, ever meet again.
I was the first one to notice that something was wrong with the dollar store I worked at. I'd hear footsteps, louder than any customer's regular footsteps, and voices, deep, menacing, and raspy. The doors would open and close on their own, and sometimes I'd hear the agonizing, quiet screams with rattling chains and trembling doorknobs. When I tried to tell my coworkers, they stared at me as though I was crazy, so I laughed it off and told them that it was just a joke. But no, it wasn't. It was something much, much worse, and I only figured that out when I worked the Easter night shift. Unlike others, I loved the night shift. It was calm and peaceful, with only one or two customers coming in for the occasional cigarette and lighter, or whatnot. I could just spend the 7 hours working on my phone, either playing games, watching videos, or messaging my friends and family who were still awake. When all my coworkers left that one fateful Easter night shift, I sat back behind the counter and waited for the original customers to come in. It didn't take long for the noises to start, though. When the door first opened, I looked up, expecting a customer, but was instead greeted with nothing. Then I heard the footsteps. They passed by the counter, leaving a trail of icy air behind them, and went down the first aisle, which was the arts and crafts aisle. A few seconds after they went and stopped, I heard a crash, and I jumped. It sounded as though a shelf had fallen over. Taking my phone into my hand, I walked down the aisle and saw a shelf of clays, pipe cleaners, crayons, and foam had indeed been tossed to the ground like it was nothing but paper. I walked over and, with effort, stood the shelf back up and began stacking it with the fallen items. It took me about 10 minutes, but when I finished, I heard another bang and a scream. It was the scream of a woman, and the bang sounded like a gunshot. The only reason I knew it sounded like a gunshot was because my father was in the Navy, and I was quite exposed to guns and their shots. I winced and walked down the aisle towards the sounds. I knew exactly where the sounds came from. They had come from the back room, where only staff were allowed and where so many extra other materials were stored. They were heard from there several times by only me, since my coworkers couldn't hear them. I opened the door, and almost immediately the lights flickered and went off. I was standing in complete darkness and silence. The refrigerator holding the drinks in the front of the store had shut down, and even the backup lights, which always blinked red, weren't working. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and as I reached for the phone and turned on the flashlight. Luckily, it still worked, to my great comfort. When the light hit the room, I almost passed out. The floor was covered in blood. Whether it was fresh or not, I couldn't tell. A semi-automatic pistol was lying on the ground beside black gloves, and blood was oozing out from the far wall. I walked across the sticky, bloody floor and shone the light onto the wall. Before I could see where the blood was coming from, the door slammed shut with force behind me. I jumped and spun around, seeing a hooded figure standing with its back to the door. When my phone's light hit the figure, I gasped. It seemed to be a man. He was tall, about 6'5", with dark, sunken-in eyes and rotting, peeling skin hanging off old, dried flesh and fragile, crunkly bones. Blood poured from his eyeless sockets, and from his open mouth, tongue hung, dried, shriveled. Who are you? I asked in a trembling voice. The figure raised a fingerless, rotting hand and pulled down its hood somehow. I continued to shine the light at him, then gasped when he stepped closer. Jackson! I breathed. Jackson was the dollar store manager before the one we had now. He had disappeared 6 years ago, and we just assumed that he had left the job without telling anyone because he was no longer interested or no longer wanted to be bothered.
I need your help.
Jackson said, his voice deep, raspy, and ancient. With what? I asked.
His name Chuck was killed in Angola.
Jackson explained. He pointed to the wall behind me, and I turned again, confused. How am I supposed to? I broke off, as when I touched the wall, it somehow slid open, as though a door was there, triggered by my finger touch. What was on the other side made me scream. 2 corpses lay side by side. One was of a man, Jackson, and the second was of a woman. Both had bits of flesh and skin hanging off brittle bones, and were both covered in blood and stab wounds. There was a chain on the floor, leading from Jackson's corpse's ankle to a bolt in the wall, and an old bloody knife was clasped in the woman's hand. I screamed in shock and horror, and probably passed out because I woke up to my manager standing over me.
Marissa,
He gasped.
what happened here?
I sat up and looked around. The wall was closed, but the floor was still covered in blood. Call the police,
I stuttered.
Let's do it, I shouted at him. The manager called the police, and when they arrived, I told them everything. They didn't believe me about the ghost incident and the whole seeing Jackson's ghost part, but they did knock down the wall, and they did find the bodies. I came to know that Jackson's wife was suspecting him of cheating on her because of his long hours at the dollar store. He kept on assuring her that he wasn't cheating, but one day, when she came to see him during his night shift, she found him and a female colleague kissing. Furious, she grabbed the hunting knife we kept underneath the counter for safety measures and stabbed her husband. She and Jackson wrestled on the floor with the knife supposedly until both had stabbed each other to death. Female colleague, who had seen everything, took the bodies into the back room and hid them in the secret room beyond the wall. She had chained Jackson and put the knife into the woman's hand to make it seem as though the wife had kidnapped him and they had died after a fight had broken out when he tried to escape. Well, to this day, I have a fear of back rooms in any dollar store. I feel horrified when I think of the voices, footsteps, and screams that I could only hear. The dead couple was probably trying to ask for help. I still wonder to this day, why me?
I wanted to buy my sister a toy for her birthday. I was 16 at the moment, and she was turning 5. Yup, quite the age gap, but despite that, I loved her, and she loved me. She looked up to me, and I would say,
Elias, I want to be like you.
I won't lie, before my sister was born, I was a pretty bad kid. I get into fights, called kids bad names, and overall, had no friends. I was a rude, angry loner in school. I would always snap at people whenever they tried to talk to me, and I could hear the teachers groaning when they found out they had to be teaching me again. But back then, I didn't care. When my sister was born, however, I finally felt like I had someone who I actually loved as much as my parents. I couldn't show my sister that I was a bad, mean kid, so I changed. Soon, teachers actually loved teaching me, and I had a tight-knit group of friends. My sister wanted a life like mine, and I wanted to be the best brother for her. So, anyways, I was returning home from school, racking in my mind that anything I could buy for my sister when a dollar store came into view. I decided to pop in and grab a teddy bear and a box of chocolates for her. When I entered the store, there were only about 10 to 12 customers and 3 employees behind the birds and butterflies, some rubber ducks and frogs, and a single spotted lizard, and a shelf full of plushies. I began going through the items, checking their prices, and muttering them aloud for no particular reason. Wolf, $3. Snake, $2. Blue cat, $2. A baboon, $4.
Excuse me?
A female's voice spoke behind me. I started to see a female employee standing behind me. She was one of the younger side with the frizzy brown hair and green eyes.
Can I help you with anything?
She asked. I'm just looking for a toy for my sister. She's turning 5.
Well then, follow me.
The employee urged. There's a truckload of new toys in the back, so I decided to go with her. I followed her to the store, hoping that there was something in the back which my sister would like. We were only a few feet from the back of the store when I heard a loud pop, then like a scream of pain. I turned, expecting to see a person with a gun or something, but saw nothing behind me. What was that? I asked. The employee smiled nervously.
Oh, nothing of importance,
she said.
Somebody must have pressed the toy or something like that. You know how people can be.
I didn't know whether to believe her or not, but I decided to push the thought to the back of my mind and proceeded to follow the employee. She stopped in front of a shelf of brand new toys, realistic with lively blue eyes and bright amber gold hair. It was dressed in a long white gown with satin lace, and all overall would fit for a good birthday gift for my sister. I'll take this, another pop, and scream interrupted me, and I whirled around in time to see somebody vanish beneath the floor. As quickly as I saw it, I didn't see it, and for a few seconds I wondered if I imagined it. The employees seemed a bit jumpy, but smiled again, and said,
Are you going to buy this doll?
Yes, I stammered. I'll get this one, I guess.
Good.
She replied, and began walking towards the checkout counter. When we were 2 feet beneath the counter, when I heard yet another pop and scream, but this time the scream was mine. I felt myself being flying through the air before I hit the hard ground, knocking my head on the wall, hard enough to be knocked out. When I awoke, I felt like I was experiencing a nightmare. The side of my head throbbed, and I couldn't move. I opened my eyes, and one day, just into the darkness, found myself in a basement-type place. I was chained to a board, screwed into the wall, with 2 people beside me. They were the people from the dollar store I'd seen when I walked in. They were also changed and knocked out. The one closest to me was a young woman, and the one beside her was an older man. They both had blood in the side of their heads, but to my relief, I didn't feel anything on my head. As I was examining my surroundings, a bright light turned on in the center of the room, and I nearly went blind. Shutting my eyes, I only opened them when I heard footsteps. I saw several hooded figures coming into the range of light. The light was coming from a large camera, which was one. The figure closest to the camera, a man, spoke first. Welcome, viewers, back to Who Goes First, Episode 4, he began. Today we are here with Victor Andrews. He pointed to the man. Lean Blues, he pointed to the woman. And Elias Fraser, he pointed right at me, and I shrugged. How did he know my name? How did he know the others? I thought. Today, the man went on, we will test who will go first with those tools. A simple kitchen knife, a sewing needle, a stapler, a saw, and a straightened paperclip. He held the items up in order, and then he picked up the knife and walked over to the man. Let's start with Mr. Anders, he said. What should we use first? I heard several beeps from the camera and saw that the man was recording live with people actually watching. I couldn't believe it. How rude were those people? Then I looked at the chat box and saw a stapler written all over it. Someone said knife, but most agreed on stapler. All right then, the man said. He picked up the stapler and walked towards the tied-up man, grabbing his finger and placing it into the stapler. With a sickening click, the man cried out in pain as the staple went through his finger. I winced, and the woman cried out in horror as blood splattered on the floor. The man laughed hard, as though enjoying the scene. I knew I couldn't let him continue. If the woman wasn't going to do anything, then I tried. I slowly began wiggling my right hand in the chains until I was able to slip out. I then reached around and fumbled for the buckle, which would undo the chains. When I grasped it beneath my fingers, I took a deep breath and undid it. The chain around my wrists and torso fell to the ground with a thud, and my legs, still loosely tied, I bolted for the stairs. "Stop him!" the man ordered angrily, and several people he was charged after with weapons in their hands. I ran, hopped up the stairs, and slammed my shoulder into the wooden door repeatedly. To my luck, it was so old that it gave away almost immediately, and I fell out into the dollar store. People stared at me, and before I passed out, I saw cops and paramedics running to the store. When I woke up in the hospital, I was told that I had stumbled in a dark web cult of some sorts that tortured innocent people for sick videos they had posted and got money for. The cops said I was lucky to be alive because the people running the dark web cult killed every person they used and posted the videos to their channel. I'm thankful every day. I am thankful to God, thankful to my life, thankful for my life. Now I am still living.
From now on, I will be providing my email in the description of all uploaded videos. This is where you can send me either a true or fictional horror story written by yourself or someone you know that has given you permission to send me their story. To ensure that your story will be read, please write it down in a Google Docs and share/send it to me via email, giving me editing rights. Please keep the sentences neat, tidy, and understandable, and try your hardest to have well-structured grammar in your writing. Stories with any form of inappropriate language/abuse, example, racism, sexism, ableism, body shaming, etc., will not be read on this channel. Please also refrain from adding any swear word or any form of swearing to your story when you are writing them. This information can also be found in the description box of this video as well as my email.
Hey Briars, what's up? Peter Gaming right here. If you want to read any of our books or support the channel, visit the site, link in the description, or if you say it out loud, make sure it's site.com/yo/bloodybriars, something like that. If you link in the description, scroll down, there's a gray button, scroll down, and hit that red button. If it's gray, go hit it, please. And if it's red, hit it. And our site, we have only 2 books, but don't worry, we can upload way more books, and we're trying to get 5,000 visits on our book, or something like that, I don't know. Just go down, click the link, and read our 2 books.